Hello YouTube. So today I am going to do a album collection update video, and I have a few shelf tours on my channel, but I've never done a video where I actually show you each individual album and tell you how I collect each group. So I figured I would do it this time, and the reason that I'm doing this is because I realized this week that it's been 3 years since I got my first K-pop album and started collecting albums, so I figured it would be a good time to do this. So the first group that I'm going to show you is Monsta X because they're my ultimate favorite K-pop group of all time. And after that, everything is going to be in alphabetical order. So for Monsta X, I collect all versions of every album that they release. So here we have Trespass, their first mini album. Here we have the second mini album, Rush, the normal version, as well as the secret version, which is my favorite version because it's really pretty. And then we move on to the third mini album, The Clan Part 1, and this is the lost version. And the found version. Now we have the fourth mini, The Clan Part 2, which is my favorite Monsta X album of all time, and this is the guilty version. And here we have the innocent version, which is my favorite version of the album. And also for that version, I have a signed copy with Hyungwon's signature on it. And that's my favorite thing that I own, I think. So after that, we have the Clan Part 2.5 Beautiful, the first full album, and here's the brilliant version. Here's the beautiful version. And here we have the beside version. And for the beautiful albums, I actually have signed copies of all three versions because I did a group order. And I have the brilliant version, I got Hyungwon's signature. And for the beautiful version, I also got Hyungwon's signature. Can you tell who my bias is? And then for the beside version, I got Shonu's signature. Then we have the repackage of Beautiful, which is Shine Forever. I have the Shine version, as well as the full clan version. I don't know why I said that weird. And then we have the Code albums, their fifth mini, and here I have the Protocol Terminal version, and this version is also Hyungwon's photo book and CD plate. Oh, I did that backwards. And then I have the Code version, which is also Hyungwon's photo book and CD plate. I didn't realize that was upside down. I'm sorry. And then we have their most recent release, which is the 6 mini, the Connect, and I have all 4 versions. Here is version 1, version 2, version 3, and version 4. I also forgot to mention, my Korean discography is complete except for the fact that for the Code versions, I want to collect a couple more member versions. I want to collect my top 3 of Minhyuk and Wonho also, but that will probably take me a while to get. So for their Japanese things, originally I decided that I wanted to collect all versions of every single, but then I realized that was going to be really hard to do and cost a lot of money, and also all of the single songs end up being on their full album anyways. And so from now on, I'm just going to collect their full album releases, which I don't have their first full Japanese album, but I will get it eventually. It's just going to take me a while. But I am going to keep the singles that I do have. So I have their Beautiful Limited B edition, as well as their single Spotlight. I think this is the normal edition. And then the only other official Monsta X thing that I have is their official light stick, and that is my Monsta X collection. So since we're going in alphabetical order, the next few groups are groups that I don't collect entire discographies from in any way, but they're groups that I have just a few albums that I like from. So the first group is 24K, and this is the most recent album that I got. And they're also one of the most recent groups that I got into. They're super underrated, and their albums are actually pretty rare because of that. So the way that I plan to collect them is I don't plan on getting any of their past releases unless if I can find them for like a good price, because a lot of their albums are really rare, and this was a rare album and it cost me like a pretty penny, but I thought it was worth it because it's one of my favorite K-pop albums. And from now on, I think I'm just going to collect their releases after Bonnie and Clyde. I do want to get that album eventually, and after that I'm just going to collect them as they come out, but I'm not going to go back and collect any of their past releases. I hope that made sense. So the next group is A-Pink, and they're a group that I like a lot of their music, but I don't stand them and I don't know the members of. Most of the groups I collect, I try to only collect groups that I know the members of, but A-Pink is one of the exceptions. I like this album a lot. It's their second mini, I believe, and all of their albums are really gorgeous. The other album that I have from them is Pink Revolution. And the next group I have is B1A4. They're a group that I also only collect the albums that I like from and have very few of. And that was their Sweet Girl album, I think. I don't know if I said that or not. And here's their Good Timing album, which is a really amazing album. And the next group is B2B, and I have their fourth mini album, Beep Beep. So the next group that I have is BTS, and they are my third favorite K-pop group. And for BTS, so far I've collected one version of all of their albums, and for me that's pretty complete right now, except I don't have the Oh Are You Late 2 album, but that's only because I'm not the hugest fan of it, to be honest, but eventually I might go back and get it just to have all of their albums. There are some albums that I do want more versions of in the future, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen. So for now, I have their first album, Too Cool for School. I also have their album, School Love Affair, which has my all-time favorite BTS song on it, which is Boy in Love. Here we have Dark and Wild. Here we have The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 1, and eventually I want to get the other version of this because it is my favorite BTS album of all time. And here we have The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 2, and I also want to get the other version of this eventually. Here we have Young Forever, the day version, and as well I would also like to get the night version because this is also one of my favorite BTS albums, even though it has both Part 1 and Part 2. Save Me is also one of my favorite BTS songs. Here we have Wings. I have the I version, and I do not plan on getting the other 3 versions of this album because I just feel like 4 is way too many versions to have. And the reason I got the I version is because this was the version that had J-Hope in it, and he's my BTS bias. Here we have You Never Walk Alone, and I believe this is the right version, and eventually I would want to get the left version only because I really like this concept and photo book, and I think it's probably my favorite from BTS, and I just really like all of the new songs off of the repackage. Here we have the Love Yourself albums. This is the Her album, and I have the L version, and the reason I got the L version is because when I was getting the album, I didn't know what the difference was between the versions, so I just decided to get the first letter of the word in case I wanted to go back and get the rest of the versions, and I'm really tempted to buy all of the versions of the Love Yourself albums because I want it to say Love Yourself on my shelf, but that's really expensive and would take a long time, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, but I want to. And here we have Love Yourself Tear, and this one I did know the difference between the versions in the photo shoots, and I got the R version because that was the denim photo shoot, and that was my favorite one. And so for BTS Japanese stuff, I don't collect their stuff, but I do have a single that I bought a while ago because I really like the song, and it's their For You single, and that is my BTS collection. The next group that I have in my collection is EXO. They're the group that got me into K-pop as well as one of my favorite groups. And the way that I collect them is, first of all, I only collect their Korean versions of their album. I don't collect any of their Chinese things just because I don't listen to them really. And I'm also planning on getting one version of all of their albums that I like, which is pretty much every album except there's a few of the special winter albums that I don't want. And so the first album that I have is their first album, XOXO, and this was the first K-pop album that I got without realizing that my favorite EXO song is not on the album. My favorite EXO song is XOXO, but I didn't realize it was only on the repackaged Growl. So eventually I do want the repackage of this album just so that I can have that song, but overall I still really like this album and I'm happy to have this copy of it. The next album that I have is their second mini, Overdose, and Overdose is actually the song that got me into K-pop. The next album that I have is their album Exodus, and for the Korean version I have Dio's cover, and this is the only exception when it comes to the Chinese things because I do have the Chinese version in Schumann's cover because he was in XOM when they did the 2 units, but I'm thinking of actually selling this and buying Schumann's cover of the Korean version just because I feel weird having the one random Chinese version in my collection. Here I have the Love Me Right album, which was actually the first comeback that I ever experienced in K-pop, so this album is pretty special to me. This is the most recent EXO album that I purchased. Not the most recent album that I have, but the most recent one that I got, if that makes sense. And we have the Exact album, which is one of my favorite EXO albums. And here we have the War album, which is also one of my favorite EXO albums. I pretty much have all of their full-length albums, but I need to get a lot of their, like, minis. Well, they only have, like, one other mini that I need, but I also need to get a lot of their repackages and stuff like that. So I need a lot for EXO, but I'm gonna work on that eventually. Also, I forgot to mention for EXO, I want to collect EXO CBX's albums, and I want all of Schumann's version because he's my EXO bias, and as well as I want to get a lot of their Japanese things because I really like EXO's Japanese releases. In fact, sometimes I prefer them over the Korean. So, like, I really want their Countdown album, and I also really want EXO CBX's Japanese albums just because they have really amazing Japanese music. The next group that I have in my collection is FX, and for them, I pretty much collect one version of all of their albums, and that's only because they only have one album that has multiple versions of it, and I don't plan on collecting any of the other members or versions. But I do think if by some chance we are given an FX comeback, I would most definitely buy multiple versions if there are one, just because we've been so deprived of FX albums for so long. So here we have their first album, New ABO. And we have Pinocchio. And then we have the repackage of that album, Hot Summer, and this album is also signed by Amber, who is my FX bias. Here we have Electric Shock, which is my favorite FX mini album. And we have Pink Tape, which is my overall favorite FX album. Here we have Red Light. And here we have Four Walls, which is another one of my favorite FX albums. And I have the white version with Amber's cover. Here we have Amber's first mini album, Beautiful. And we also have Luna's first mini album, Free Somebody. The next couple of groups in my collection don't have a lot of albums, so I'm just going to show them together. This group is Icon, and I have their debut half album, and I have it in the red version. And I also have their second full album, Return, and eventually I would like to buy the full debut version of the album, but I also want to keep buying the red versions of their album, because the first one I bought the red version because I liked it better than the green one, and then for the Return album I wasn't sure which one to get, and I was just like, well, I bought the red version for the first album, so I may as well buy the red version for the full album, and it just became a thing. And I'm also not collecting that one other album that they have. I don't know what it's called, but I didn't like the that comeback, so I'm not buying it. But yeah, that is what I have for Icon. The next group that we have is Card, and they are one of my ultimate groups, and I have their first mini album, Hola Hola. And I also have their second mini album, You and Me, signed by all of the members, and I'm really excited because they're having a comeback soon, and I've missed them a lot. And the other thing that I have for Card is I have their light stick from the tour that I went to see them on. Also for Card, I forgot to mention that so far they only have one version of both of their minis, but if they do release two versions for this next mini and anything in the future, I will be buying all versions because I love them a lot. The next group that I have in my collection is NCT, and they are my second favorite ultimate group. And also earlier I forgot to mention that while BTS are my third favorite group, they're also an ultimate group, and so are FX. Yes, I just forgot to mention that those two were also ultimate groups. So for NCT, collecting is kind of, NCT in general are kind of complicated, but collecting them is also complicated, so I'm just going to explain it as I go. So I keep my album in my albums in chronological order, and as of right now I collect all of the units, but I'm not sure if I will do that forever. Like I know they're supposed to debut a Chinese unit some point soon, and I'm not sure if I'm going to like that unit or not because I don't typically like music in Chinese. I just prefer either Korean or Japanese music. But if I do like it, I probably will buy it, but we'll just have to see about that when it happens. So for NCT 127, I have their debut album. I'm not sure if it's called Fire Truck or just their first mini album, but it has the Fire Truck comeback on it. And here we have Limitless, and for NCT, if they release multiple versions of albums in the future, I will buy them, but for this one, I'm not, just because, you know, everybody hates the packaging of this album, and I do too. The only reason I have the album is because the songs on it are so good that it's too good not to own. And the next album is their third mini album, Cherry Bomb. So the next unit is NCT Dream, and I have their first single album, as well as their first mini album, We Young. And for NCT Dream, I plan to collect all of their albums and probably all of the versions as well, just because I really like NCT. And here we have NCT 2018's Empathy album, and I have the Dream version. I'm still trying to get the reality version. I decided for the special projects, I'm also going to buy all of the versions, and I want the reality version, but the last couple of paychecks I haven't been able to buy any of albums, and also every time I go online it seems to be out of stock, so eventually I want to get it, but it's just been hard. So that is my NCT collection. The next group that I have is ONF, and I have their first mini album, On and Off, and I also want to get their second mini album, Complete, and I think if they ever did multiple versions of their album, I would probably buy at most two. but I don't see them doing that anytime soon. So the next group that I have is Pentagon, and they are one of my favorite groups, and I have their first mini album, Pentagon, which is my favorite Pentagon mini album, and I also have an all-member signed copy. I also have their second mini album, Five Senses, as well as their third mini album, Ceremony. And I have their fourth mini album, Demo 1. And their fifth mini album, Demo 2. And their sixth mini album, Positive, which has been my favorite Pentagon comeback of all time, I think. And also, so far, they've only released one version of all of their albums, which is one of my favorite things about Pentagon, to be honest. But I think if they did release multiple versions of their album, I would buy them just because I love Pentagon a lot. The next group that we have is Red Velvet, and the only album that I have right now is, I think it's their second full, it's their first full, The Red. And for Red Velvet, I plan on collecting one version of all of their albums that I like, and also they are my second favorite girl group. The next group that I have is 17, and for them I only have two albums. I have Going 17, and I also have AL1. Now for 17, my plan is to just collect one version of all of their albums so far, although for AL1 I am tempted to buy all three versions just because the photo books are really pretty for that album. For SF9, I have their first single album, All Member Signed. And I also have their second mini album. That was their first single album, and I have their first mini album. And I also have their first mini album signed by all of the members, and eventually I want to get their other two albums. But for SF9, if they release multiple versions, I don't think that I would buy more than one. The next group that we have is Shiny, and the only album that I have from them is the Story of Light EP1, but eventually I do want to get the other two EPs for this series, and there are some other Shiny albums that I want, but I don't think I would ever collect everything from them. And last but not least, the last group that I have in my collection is VIX. And for VIX, I pretty much just collect one version of the albums that I like. So here we have Jekyll. And then we also have Chained Up. I'm not sure which version this is though. And here we have Shangri-La. And here we also have Robbie's first mini Realize. There are a lot of things that I want to get for VIX, but that will be in the future. Alright, so that was my album collection and everything that I am and how I collect the groups. And thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.